Rhodes is the largest of the Dodecanese islands in terms of land area and also the island group's historical capital. Administratively, the island forms a separate municipality within the Rhodes regional unit, which is part of the South Aegean region. The principal town of the island and seat of the municipality is Rhodes. The city of Rhodes had 50,636 inhabitants in 2011. It is located northeast of Crete, southeast of Athens and just off the Anatolian coast of Turkey. Rhodes' nickname is the Island of the Knights, named after the Knights of St. John of Jerusalem, who once conquered the land. Historically, Rhodes was famous worldwide for the Colossus of Rhodes, one of the seven wonders of the ancient world. The medieval old town of the city of Rhodes has been declared a World Heritage Site. Today, it is one of the most popular tourist destinations in Europe. Name: the island has been known as Rho Omicron Delta Omicron Sigma in Greek throughout its history. In addition, the island has been called Italian, Rhodi, Turkish, Rhodes, and Ladino, Rhodi or Rhodes. The Travels of Sir John Mandeville incorrectly reports that Rhodes was formerly called Colossus, through a conflation of the Colossus of Rhodes and Paul's epistle to the Colossians, which refers to Colossae. Geography: the island of Rhodes is shaped like a spearhead, 79.7 kilometers long and 38 kilometers wide, with a total area of approximately 1,400 square kilometers and a coastline of approximately 220 kilometers. The city of Rhodes is located at the northern tip of the island, as well as the site of the ancient and modern commercial harbors. The main air gateway is located 14 kilometers to the southwest of the city in Paradise. The road network radiates from the city along the east and west coasts. Outside of the city of Rhodes, the island is dotted with small villages and spa resorts, among them Falaraki, Lindos, Kremesti, Haraki, Pefkos, Archangelos, Afantu, Ixia, Koskanau, Mbona, Paradise, and Triantha. There are mineral-rich spring water used to give medicinal baths and the spa resorts offer various health treatments, which are also known as balneotherapy. It is situated 363 kilometers east-southeast from Greece mainland and only 18 kilometers from the southern shore of Turkey. Flora: the interior of the island is mountainous, sparsely inhabited and covered with forests of pine and cypress. While the shores are rocky, the island has arable strips of land where citrus fruit, wine grapes, vegetables, olives and other crops are grown. Fauna: the Rhodian population of fallow deer was found to be genetically distinct in 2005, and to be of urgent conservation concern. In Petalaudis Valley, large numbers of tiger moths gather during the summer months. Mount Atavirus, at 1,216 meters, is the island's highest point of elevation. Earthquakes: earthquakes include the 226 BC earthquake that destroyed the Colossus of Rhodes, one on 3 May 1481 which destroyed much of the city of Rhodes, and one on 26 June 1926. On 15 July 2008, Rhodes was struck by a 6.3 magnitude earthquake causing minor damage to a few old buildings and one death. Climate: Rhodes has a hot summer Mediterranean climate. History: early in classical antiquity the island was inhabited in the Neolithic period, although little remains of this culture. In the 16th century BC, the Minoans came to Rhodes. Later Greek mythology recalled a Rhodian race called the Telchines and associated the island of Rhodes with Danaus. It was sometimes nicknamed Telchines. In the 15th century BC, Mycenaean Greeks invaded. After the Bronze Age collapse, the first renewed outside contacts were with Cyprus. In the 8th century BC, the island's settlements started to form, with the coming of the Dorians, who built the three important cities of Lindos, Ialissus and Camiros, which together with Kos, Cnidus and Halicarnassus made up the so-called Dorian hexapolis. In Pindar's ode, the island was said to be born of the union of Helios the sun god and the nymph Rhode, and the cities were named for their 3 sons. The rhoda is a pink hibiscus native to the island. Diodorus Siculus added that Actis, one of the sons of Helios and Rhode, traveled to Egypt. He built the city of Heliopolis and taught the Egyptians astrology. Homer mentions that Rhodes participated in the Trojan War under the leadership of Tlepolemus. In the second half of the 8th century, the sanctuary of Athena received votive gifts that are markers for cultural contacts: small ivories from the Near East and bronze objects from Syria. At Camiros on the northwest coast, a former Bronze Age site, where the temple was founded in the 8th century, there is another notable contemporaneous sequence of carved ivory figurines. The cemeteries of Camiros and Dialysis yielded several exquisite exemplars of the orientalizing Rhodian jewelry, dated in the 7th and early 6th centuries BC. Phoenician presence on the island at Ialissos is attested in traditions recorded much later by Rhodian historians. The Persians invaded and overran the island, but they were in turn defeated by forces from Athens in 478 BC. The Rhodian cities joined the Athenian League. When the Peloponnesian War broke out in 431 BC, Rhodes remained largely neutral, although it remained a member of the League. The war lasted until 404 BC, but by this time Rhodes had withdrawn entirely from the conflict and decided to go her own way. In 408 BC, the cities united to form one territory. They built the city of Rhodes, a new capital on the northern end of the island. Its regular plan was, according to Strabo, superintended by the Athenian architect Hippodamus. In 357 BC, the island was conquered by the king Mausolus of Caria, then it fell again to the Persians in 340 BC. Their rule was also short. Hellenistic Age Rhodes then became a part of the growing empire of Alexander the Great in 332 BC, after he defeated the Persians. Following the death of Alexander, his generals vied for control of the kingdom. 3. Ptolemy, Seleucus, and Antigonus succeeded in dividing the kingdom among themselves. Rhodes formed strong commercial and cultural ties with the Ptolemies in Alexandria, and together formed the Rhodo-Egyptian alliance that controlled trade throughout the Aegean in the 3rd century BC. The city developed into a maritime, commercial and cultural center. Its coins circulated nearly everywhere in the Mediterranean. Its famous schools of philosophy, science, literature and rhetoric shared masters with Alexandria. The Athenian rhetorician Aeschines, who formed a school at Rhodes, Apollonius of Rhodes, the observations and works of the astronomers Hippocrates and Geminus, the rhetorician Dionysius Thrax. Its school of sculptors developed, under Pergame's influence, a rich, dramatic style that can be characterized as Hellenistic Baroque. Agesandra of Rhodes, with 2 other Rhodian sculptors, carved the famous Laocoon group, now in the Vatican museums, and the large sculptures rediscovered at Sperlonga in the villa of Tiberius, probably in the early imperial period. In 3005 BC, Antigonus directed his son, Demetrius, to besiege Rhodes in an attempt to break its alliance with Egypt. Demetrius created huge siege engines, including a 180 feet battering ram and a siege tower named Helepolis that weighed 360,000 pounds. Despite this engagement, in 304 BC, after only 1 year, he relented and signed a peace agreement, leaving behind a huge store of military equipment. The Rhodians sold the equipment and used the money to erect a statue of their sun god, Helios, the statue since called the Colossus of Rhodes. Throughout the 3rd century BC, Rhodes attempted to secure her independence and her commerce, most especially her virtual control over the grain trade in the eastern Mediterranean. Both of these goals were dependent upon no one of the 3 great Hellenistic states achieving dominance, and consequently the Rhodians pursued a policy of maintaining a balance of power among the Antigonids, Seleucids and Ptolemies. even if that meant going to war with her traditional ally, Egypt. To this end they employed as leverage their economy and their excellent navy, which was manned by proverbially the finest sailors in the Mediterranean world. If we have 10 Rhodians, we have 10 ships. Rhodes successfully carried on this policy through the course of the 3rd century BC, an impressive achievement for what was essentially a democratic state. By the end of that period, however, the balance of power was crumbling, as declining Ptolemaic power made Egypt an attractive target for Seleucid ambitions. In 203 halves BC, the young and dynamic kings of Antigonide Macedon and Seleucid Asia, Philip V and Antiochus III, agreed to accept, at least temporarily, their respective military ambitions. Philip's campaign in the Aegean and western Anatolia, and Antiochus a final solution of the Egyptian question. Heading a coalition of small states, the Rhodians checked Philip's navy, but not his superior army. Without a third power to which to turn, the Rhodians appealed in 201 BC to the Roman Republic. Despite being exhausted by the titanic struggle against Hannibal, the Romans agreed to intervene, having already been stabbed in the back by Philip during the war against Carthage. The Senate saw the appeal from Rhodes and her allies as the opportunity to pressure Philip. The result was the Second Macedonian War, which ended Macedon's role as a major player and preserved Rhodian independence. The Romans actually withdrew from Greece after the end of the conflict, but the resulting power vacuum quickly drew in Antiochus and subsequently the Romans, who defeated the last Mediterranean power that might even vaguely threaten the predominance. Having provided Rome with valuable naval help in her first foray into Asia, the Rhodians were rewarded with territory and enhanced status. The Romans once again evacuated the east. The Senate preferred clients to provinces, but it was clear that Rome now ruled the world and Rhodian autonomy was ultimately dependent upon good relations with them, and those good graces soon evaporated in the wake of the Third Macedonian War. In 169 BC, during the war against Perseus, Rhodes sent Polis as ambassador to the consul Quintus Marcius Philippus, and then to Rome in the following year, hoping to turn the Senate against the war. Rhodes remained scrupulously neutral during the war, but in the view of hostile elements in the Senate she had been a bit too friendly with the defeated King Perseus. Some actually proposed declaring war on the island republic, but this was averted. In 164, Rhodes became a permanent ally of Rome, ending an independence that no longer had any meaning. It was said that the Romans ultimately turned against the Rhodians because the islanders were the only people they had encountered who were more arrogant than themselves. After surrendering its independence, Rhodes became a cultural and educational center for Roman noble families and was especially noted for its teachers of rhetoric, such as Hermagoras and the unknown author of Rhetorica ad Herennium. At first, the state was an important ally of Rome and enjoyed numerous privileges, but these were later lost in various machinations of Roman politics. Cassius eventually invaded the island and sacked the city. In the early imperial period, Rhodes became a favorite place for political exiles. In the 1st century AD, the Emperor Tiberius spent a brief term of exile on Rhodes. St. Paul brought Christianity to people on the island. Rhodes reached her zenith in the 3rd century. Peria Rhodiorum is a designation of the mainland possessions of Rhodes in Asia Minor between 167 B until the 2nd century AD. It included part of historical Caria, roughly across the region extending from the modern city of Mugla in the north and Kaunos bordering Lycia in the south, near the present-day Dalyan, Turkey. Byzantine period in 395 with the division of the Roman Empire. The long Byzantine period began for Rhodes. In late antiquity, the island was the capital of the Roman province of the islands, headed by a praeses, and encompassing most of the Aegean islands, with 20 cities. Correspondingly, the island was also the metropolis of the ecclesiastical province of Cyclades, with 11 suffragan sees. Beginning from California, 600 AD, its influence in maritime issues was manifested in the collection of maritime laws known as Rhodian Sea Law, accepted throughout the Mediterranean and in use throughout Byzantine times. Rhodes was occupied by the Islamic Umayyad forces of Caliph Muawiyah I in 654, who carried off the remains of the Colossus of Rhodes. The island was again captured by the Arabs in 673 as part of their first attack on Constantinople, when the fleet was destroyed by Greek fire before Constantinople, and by storms on its return trip. However, the island was evacuated in 679 as part of the Byzantine-Umayyad peace treaty. In 715 the Byzantine fleet dispatched against the Arabs launched a rebellion at Rhodes, which led to the installation of Theodosius III on the Byzantine throne. From the early 8th to the 12th centuries, Rhodes belonged to the Siberiot theme of the Byzantine Empire, and was a center for shipbuilding and commerce. In c. 1090, it was occupied by the forces of the Seljuk Turks. Not long after the Battle of Manzikert, Rhodes was recaptured by the Emperor Alexios I Komnenos during the First Crusade. As Byzantine central power weakened under the Angeloi emperors, in the first half of the 13th century, Rhodes became the center of an independent domain under Heliogabalus and his brother John, until it was occupied by the Genoese in 1248–1250. The Genoese were evicted by the Empire of Nicaea, after which the island became a regular province of the Nicaean state. In 1305, the island was given as a fief to Andrea Morisco, a Genoese adventurer who had entered Byzantine service. But Rhodes was controlled by Mentes, was one of Anatolian beyliks between 1300 and 1314. Crusader and Islamic rule in 1309. The Byzantine era of the island's history came to an end when the island was occupied by forces of the Knights Hospitaller. Under the rule of the newly named Knights of Rhodes, the city was rebuilt into a model of the European medieval ideal. Many of the city's famous monuments, including the Palace of the Grand Master, were built during this period. The strong walls which the knights had built withstood the attacks of the Sultan of Egypt in 1444, and a siege by the Ottomans under Mehmed II in 1480. Eventually, however, Rhodes fell to the large army of Suleiman the Magnificent in December 1522. In 1522, an entirely new sort of force arrived. 400 ships under the command of Sultan Suleiman the Magnificent delivered 100,000 men to the island. Against this force the knights, under Grand Master Philippe Villiers de l'Isle Adam, had about 7,000 men-at-arms in their fortifications. The siege lasted 6 months, at the end of which the surviving defeated Hospitallers were allowed to withdraw to Sicily. Despite the defeat, both Christians and Muslims seem to have regarded the conduct of Villiers de l'Isle Adam as extremely valiant, and the Grand Master was proclaimed a defender of the faith by Pope Hadrian VI. The few surviving knights were permitted to retire to the Kingdom of Sicily, from where they would later move their base of operations to Malta. Rhodes was thereafter a possession of the Ottoman Empire for nearly 4 centuries. Modern history. The island was populated by ethnic groups from the surrounding nations, including Jews. Under Ottoman rule, they generally did fairly well, but discrimination and bigotry occasionally arose. In February 1840, the Jews of Rhodes were falsely accused of ritually murdering a Christian boy. This became known as the Rhodes blood libel. Austria opened a post office at Rhodes before 1864, as witnessed by stamps with Franz Joseph Head. In 1912, Italy seized Rhodes from the Turks during the Italo-Turkish War. The island's population thus bypassed many of the events associated with the exchange of the minorities between Greece and Turkey. After World War I, the island, together with the rest of the Dodecanese, was officially assigned to Italy in the Treaty of Lausanne. It then became the core of their possession of the Isole Italiane di Liegio. Following the Italian armistice of 8 September 1943, the British attempted to get the Italian garrison on Rhodes to change sides. This was anticipated by the German army, which succeeded in occupying the island. In great measure, the German occupation caused the British failure in the subsequent Dodecanese campaign. The Turkish consul Selahattin Ulumen succeeded, at considerable risk to himself and his family, in saving 42 Jewish families, about 200 persons in total, who had Turkish citizenship or were members of Turkish citizens' families. On 8 May 1945, the Germans under Otto Wagner surrendered Rhodes as well as the Dodecanese as a whole to the British, who soon after then occupied the islands as a military protectorate. In 1947, Rhodes, together with the other islands of the Dodecanese, was united with Greece. In 1949, Rhodes was the venue for negotiations between Israel and Egypt, Jordan, Lebanon, and Syria, concluding with the 1949 armistice agreements. Archaeology. The Colossus of Rhodes was considered to be one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. This giant bronze statue was documented as once standing at the harbour. It was completed in 280 BC and destroyed in an earthquake in 224 BC. No trace of the statue remains today. Historical sites on the island of Rhodes include the Acropolis of Lindos, the Acropolis of Rhodes with the Temple of Pythian Apollo and an ancient theatre and stadium, ancient Ialissos, ancient Camiros, the Governor's Palace, Rhodes Old Town, the Palace of the Grand Masters, Kahal Shalom Synagogue in the Jewish Quarter, the Archaeological Museum, the ruins of the Castle of Monolithis, the Castle of Cretinia, St. Catherine Hospice and Rhodes Footbridge.